It's night, it's snowing, and there's a church. Not a little parish church, but a socking great church with a spire that launches itself up into the sky, except you can't see the top of it because, as I think I mentioned, it's night and it's snowing. But what you can see in front of the church is an area, and you can see it because it's lit by dozens of great flaming torches that gutter and hiss and steam as the snow drives into them. But what they illuminate nonetheless, in the area are 5 men hunched and huddled against the cold, with their hoods and their cloaks wrapped tightly against them, but looking out away from each other. They're standing in a circle themselves, and their faces are lined and they're hard, and you know that they are warriors, you know they are knights, you know they're guarding something. And what they're guarding, you can see that too, because where their unsteady shadows cross like the spokes of a wheel, right in the centre of the circle is a stone, and on the stone is an anvil, and in the anvil is a sword. And the most remarkable thing about any of this is that none of this was here just this morning, just this Christmas Day morning, none of it was here. And nobody knows how it got here, but they know why it's here, because it's labelled on the sword. It's written in letters of gold, "Whosoever pulls this sword from this anvil is rightwise king of the island of the mighty." Now, I hear you say, do we not have a high king? Or I would hear you say it if this wasn't a pre-recorded video. For all I know, you are screaming at the screen, do we not have a high king of the island of the mighty? And I'm somewhere else having my tea. That's strange. But you will say, do we not have one? We have a high king. I know it's the Roman Empire's collapse. I know it's the Dark Ages. I know the warlords are tearing apart the island of the mighty, but we have a high king, don't we? To keep them all in order. And his name is Uther Pendragon. And you're right and you're wrong, because Uther Pendragon died a couple of years ago. Keep up with the news, for goodness sakes. He's dead. And because nature and warlords abhor a vacuum, you may be sure that those warlords have been whetting their appetites and whetting their blades in anticipation of war, amassing their armies so that now the smell of civil war, like burning, is in the air. And that is just the smell of those blazing torches. Until a couple of weeks ago, when things seemed to be a tipping point where it looked like the least friction would result in a cataclysmic conflict, then Merlin stepped in. You know Merlin, son of a demon, they say. Hunter of dragons for High King Vortigern, they say. The man whose magics built Stonehenge, they say. And that Merlin, that wizard, that sorcerer, issued a summons to all the warlords to gather in the capital in order that a magic wonder take place that would determine for them who should be the High King. And the warlords, they came, and they gathered, and they came into the church, and they listened to the High Mass this Christmas Day morning, and they piled out, and there in front of them, where there had been nothing before, was the stone, and the anvil, and the sword. Once they had read what it said, once they'd had read to them what it said, on the sword, with sharp elbows of ambition, they jostled forward, and each and every one of them, of course, had a go at heaving the, straining the. They couldn't budge it. Not one of them, not 1 inch. They tried again, and yoinked, pulled, and heaved until the veins pulsed in their foreheads, and they would beetroot red from the exertion despite the cold midwinter air, but they could not budge it 1 inch. And Merlin smiled inscrutably. Why do you not hold a tournament? To while away the time, but also because if you want huge, fierce warriors, what better way to assemble them than the promise of a tournament? And of course the warlords agreed, because those blustering, beefy warlords, well, they like nothing better than to beat each other up for fun in a tournament with sticks and staves and swords. And so it was organised for New Year's Day, and come they did from all over, warlords from all over the island of the mighty to that tournament, and amongst them came Sir Ector. Now Sir Ector had served the High King Uther, but his star was in the descendant, shall we say. His son, on the other hand, Kay, lately knighted, in fact, Sir Kay, I should call him, well, he had promise. He was big and brash and bold. He would do well in the tournament. Ector would have been the first to admit that probably he was not kingly material, what with being a bit of a braggart and a bully and a bad-tempered one at that. But, to be honest, Ector didn't really fancy his chances anyway. But to be near a king, when a king is made, that's a good thing, isn't it, for a young knight? And so they came to the tournament. And there Kay stood in his arming tent with his mighty oak-like arms outstretched. And outside you could hear the clamour and the clang of the armourers and the tilt yard with the melee and the jousting was taking place. He growled, "Sword!" And Arthur looked up from where he was working and said, I thought you brought it. "What do you mean I brought it?" said Kay. "Arthur, we've been through this before. I know we're brothers, but we're not proper brothers. You have been adopted, after all, and more to the point, in this relationship, I'm the knight, you're the squire. You fetch, I fight. That's how this works. Where's my sword?" "Well, I thought you brought it, so I guess it's back at the lodgings. Shall I go and get it?" No. Don't go and get it. By the time you're back here, the tournament will be over. What are we going to do?" "Well, I'll sort out something," said Arthur. "I'll find you a sword. Don't you worry about it." "You'd better," said Kay, but his raised hand met empty air, for the fleet, slight, bright-eyed Arthur was out the tent flap and running to see if he could fetch a sword for his brother. And first he went to ask the knights, "Sir Knights, I wonder if you wouldn't mind sparing me a sword." But they sneered at him. And then he went to ask the squires, "Fellow squires, you have many spare swords, I'm sure. I wonder if I could borrow one for my knight, who has some helmet." But they scowled at him. And then he went to the armourers and asked them, as they sweated and clanged and dinked and dented on their work, "You have many spare swords, could I possibly have one?" And they told him, "Get lost." And he did. He got properly lost, actually. He couldn't find his way in the capital. He was not familiar with it. And so he stumbled out, all unawares, into that area in front of the church, with all the great flaming torches, of course, unlit in the bright midwinter sunshine, and in the middle of it all, unattended, presumably the knights had gone off to have a look at the tournament, the stone, the anvil, the sword. Now maybe Arthur didn't read the news. Maybe Arthur was so focused on meeting his brother's need that he just didn't think about it, but he went forward, he grabbed the sword by the hilt and drew it out without difficulty and raced back off to the encampment in order to present it to his brother. And the armourers paused mid-clang, and the squires paused mid-scowl, and the knights paused mid-sneer, as Arthur quickly walked past them holding that sword to his brother's tent, and presented to his brother on bended knee. And Kay looked at the sword, and he looked at Arthur, and then he looked at his father, who had just come in, and his father asked the obvious question, "Kay, did you draw the sword from the stone?" Now Kay comes in for a lot of bad press, I think, later in the stories of Arthur, being a bully, being a braggart, I guess. That's inevitable. But at this point, there are many things that Kay could have seen to say, and I dare say many of them crossed his mind. But what he said was this: "No, Father, it was not me. It was Arthur. Arthur drew the sword from the anvil." Well, news like that travels fast. It's helped, of course, by the fact that the ears of the knights and the squires and the armourers were pressed up against the tent. They wanted to know what was happening. So it's hardly surprising that within moments Arthur found himself being frog-marched back towards the area in front of the church. "You took it out, put it back," said the warlord. So he did. And once again the warlords had a go at pulling and heaving and yoinking and straining, but they couldn't budge it, not 1 inch. "Try again," said the warlords, and Arthur did, and pulled it out with ease and raised it aloft. And Merlin was there. "See, the boy has drawn the sword from the anvil. He is right-wise High King of the Island of the Mighty." But not everyone agreed. At the back of the crowd, some of the warlords shouted, "He's a boy! Who is he? A non-entity, a foundling, a foster child? We do not want him to be our ruler." "Very well," said Merlin. "Go away. Find more potential High Kings if you want. Bring them back here, by all means. We'll do it all again." And off they went, and back at Candlemas they came. And in the meantime, I dare say those warlords have been working with their kettlebells and their bulwarkers, trying to get into shape. And once again they tried, and they pulled, and they heaved, and they yoinked, and they strained, but they couldn't budge it, not 1 inch. And Arthur drew once again with ease, "Rightwise, king of the island of the mighty." "No, he's a boy, we don't want him," said a few voices. "This time, go away, come back, I don't mind, I've got time," said Merlin, and away they went, and back they came. At Easter, this time. And it all took place again, and away they went, and back they came at Pentecost, near midsummer. And there now, with the snows obviously all gone, and the bright sun in the blue, blue sky, Arthur, and Arthur alone, drew the sword from the anvil and raised it aloft. And when Merlin proclaimed him, no one objected. "Good," said Merlin. "Be it known that he is the son, after all, of Uther Pendragon. I did not want a king who thought he was entitled to that place, and so when he was a babe in arms, I stole him away and gave him to Sir Ector to raise, in a position of relative humility and humbleness, and it has paid dividends. All of you thought you entitled to be king, but not he, not the boy. And now, my lords, he is rightwise king of all the island of the mighty, for now, for once, forever." And those lords, they knelt down and they bowed their heads. This is really just the first of many, many stories about King Arthur and his knights and his court and their adventures. And what does it tell us about heroism? I think it tells us that heroism is often to be found in those who do not think or assume that they are heroic. That, at least I believe, is one thing that we can derive from the story of Arthur and the sword in the anvil in the stone.